Ahmad going from the Wildcat on first down. A reverse here, a reverse pass. And it's Bean and throwing it down the field. It's caught. And Ward breaks away. Ahmad to the end zone for the touchdown.
Live from our Seton Hill University studios, this is Westmoreland on the Gridiron on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here's your host, Sean Meyers.
And we welcome you into another playoff edition of Westmoreland on the Gridiron each and every Wednesday, 7 p.m. right here on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Sean Meyers joined by Dan Flickinger for the second week talking about the playoffs. This time we'll look back at the first week of the playoffs, and it was a little bit of a struggle for the Westmoreland County teams, but we still have three teams alive. We'll talk to the respective head coaches of those teams, Ron Prady with Greater Latrobe, Matt Humbert, the head coach of the Belle Vernon area Leopards, and JT, John Thompson, the first-year head coach of Greensburg Central Catholic. We'll also look at the top performers from the first week of the playoffs. But Flick, as we run down these scores, before we get into that, a tough go of it for Westmoreland County. As I mentioned, only three teams remaining, two of which scored victories on Friday. Unfortunately, many of our teams saw their season come to an end.
Yeah, like I said, you put in all this work during the season, and then you get into the WPIAL playoffs. And for a lot of teams, that's kind of the pinnacle. That's what's really rewarding for them. And, maybe they don't have a good matchup against whoever they play in the first round, and they go out in the first round, but they should be proud of what they accomplished just getting to the playoffs. And, for a couple teams like Southmoreland, I'm sure was really disappointing. They finally broke the streak of getting to the WPIAL playoffs a couple of years ago, and then they're looking for that first playoff win, and we thought that they would have a legitimate chance of doing that against Deer Lakes, and the Lancers just kind of crushed them, try to put it mildly, I guess, in that game, which was disappointing for them. But then you look at a team like Latrobe, and I know we'll get into some of these things, but they did what they needed to do in that playoff game against a really, really good program in West Allegheny, and they crushed them. So that was a heck of a performance by Latrobe. So, yeah, some disappointment, certainly, that only a couple of Westmoreland County teams are remaining. But really, Sean, going into the first round, we knew that there would be some really hard matchups for some of our teams, and they might not come out on top, but still really good seasons for a lot of teams.
Well, you mentioned a couple of games that I thought would be sort of pick-em type games where I could see it going either way. And there were several of those games that went against Westmoreland County teams. Let's run down all of the teams that were in action. Again, Belle Vernon, the only one in Westmoreland County that made the playoffs that did not play. We'll talk about the Leopards later. They got a first-round bye as the number one seed in 3A. So all the other Westmoreland County playoff teams did play last week, beginning in Class 5A. Keep in mind, 5A starts in the quarterfinals. There was only 8 teams in the field. I thought this could be a pick-em type game. I could have seen it gone either way. It was anything but competitive. Penn Hills 63, Penn Trafford 28. You can go back and watch that one. I had the call of it. Honestly, I'm shocked that it was that lopsided. Playing at home, winning their conference, yeah, the Indians probably should have been favored, but I never in a million years thought that they would score touchdowns on every single possession of the game until the last one when they took kneel downs. I don't ever remember John Ruane's team giving up that much defensively. The Warriors actually did a nice job racking up yards offensively, but plagued by 5 turnovers. Really uncharacteristic and surprising from my perspective.
Yeah, and really the defense has been a strength for them this year. I don't think anybody thought that they would give up 63 points going into the game. I don't know that, there were a lot of people that thought Penn Trafford maybe would come out on top in the game, but we thought it would be much closer than that, and giving up 63 points is give a lot of credit to guys like Tasso Whipple and the offense, other than turning the ball over, the drives that they did put together. But like you said, Sean, off the air, we were talking about the game. It seemed like every time it looked like Penn Trafford might seize back some of the momentum, Penn Hills would go down and score just like that. And all of a sudden, Penn Hills would have the momentum back. And John Ruane said that after the game. We couldn't get momentum. We played well in spurts, but certainly not consistent enough. And it was interesting to hear from Coach Morris on the other side for Penn Hills. He said after the game that he felt that the game was much closer than what the final score was. If it wasn't for the mistakes, it certainly would have been. And he said how much respect he has for John Ruane and Penn Trafford, and how you have to game plan against their offense, because we all know John calls a great game. So I thought that was kind of interesting and some good sportsmanship. And those two guys, I think, cross paths at Gateway as assistants. So, but another solid year for Penn Trafford, but one that I know the expectations are really high there, and they expect to make playoff runs every year. So, they'll go back in the lab and try to do it again next year.
Few things. One, a lot of the key skill guys are going to be back for Penn Trafford, both of their quarterbacks. Now, Grabowski did get hurt at the end of the game, which was really tough to see. It was very late in that contest. Seemed like it could have potentially been fairly serious just based on how long he was down and then really needing some help to get off. But he was a freshman. Ponko, one of their better receivers, a freshman. Whipple has eligibility remaining. So they're going to have some really good skill guys returning. And I think Rush always sends us the stats after each game. It does a great job with that.
Shout out to Rush. He's our biggest fan. Westmoreland on the Gridiron, baby.
I believe, if I saw correctly, they were well over 400 yards of total offense in that game. So they did rack up the yards, but you could see how quickly a game can turn if you turn the football over and if you allow big plays against, and that's what happened. On the other side, Penn Hills, their quarterback, everyone knows Julian Duggar's been a Pitt commit this entire season, but I wondered, is he really that good? Because he never really put up eye-popping numbers. He was like 1,300 yards passing this year, never really put up just monster performances. He was better than I imagined, knowing that he was already a Power 5 quarterback, better than I imagined. And the guys around him were explosive, including his running back, Amir Key. So I don't know if Penn Hills is going to go all the way, but if they play like they did on offense against Penn Trafford, they will beat any team in 5A.
Well, it should be really, really interesting to see Penn Hills go up against another power in Pine Richland. Should be a great game on Friday.
Absolutely. So that was one of the games that we had a broadcast of, and we were so glad to be able to bring some of these playoff games courtesy of WSN. Another one was McGuffey 25, Derry Area 13, as the Trojan season comes to an end. And this is one of the rare cases where I could truly say that in a loss, there's still probably a major bright spot for the Trojans, because they were heavy underdogs going in. They got down early. They battled back. It was, a 12-point game. So I think for Mike Arone, even though it ends with a first-round playoff loss, a major step forward, not just in that game, but for the season as a whole, that they hopefully will build on.
Yeah, I think there was some disappointment in that game. Certainly anytime you lose, especially a playoff game, you're disappointed. Even though you look at Derry snapping the streak early in the year, the losing streak, getting to the playoffs. I mean, they should be really, really proud of what they're able to accomplish, and hopefully they can build on that. But you look at the game, the Trojans played much better in the second half. They made some adjustments on defense at halftime, and they didn't allow a single point to McGuffey in the second half. And in the first half, the Trojans actually, I think their first two drives stalled out in McGuffey territory. So if they score on one, maybe both of those drives, the game could have been certainly different. So, you look back and you have some missed opportunities in that game if you're Derry. But, hey, I just want to give a shout out to Ahmad Ward for having a tremendous senior season. It's a shame that injuries had to take away some previous years, but he laid it all out this year. He was their offense, and the way that he was able to stay healthy, durable, and get that many carries a game. He scored both touchdowns for Derry. That's going to be really hard to replace. I mean, a team turning around a football program, you have that good year, you're hoping to build on it. But when you lose a player like that, that does present some challenges, even though they do have some talent, coming from middle school and the guys that were freshmen this year. So
yeah, their freshmen were really good this year. I was very impressed, more so on the defensive side, because of course, offensively, they just let Ward do his thing, but defensively, some freshmen really stood out. Yeah.
And there was another freshman, Sean, and his name is escaping me right now. He didn't play at all this year, but he was really good for middle school last year. Hopefully he'll be healthy next year, because he's another good player. And again, his name is escaping me right now, but yeah, so you need the younger guys to continue to develop, and I think that's going to happen. But again, I mean, it'll be a little bit of a question mark who's going to take those, going to be able to fill Ahmad's shoes. But he was absolutely tremendous. So yeah, I mean, definitely a successful season for the Trojans as they continue to build.
Another game that we had coverage of was California Airy 44 and Jeanette 6. So the Trojans move on. The Jayhawks see their season. And, I thought maybe if all things go perfectly, it could be a competitive game because California comes from that much maligned Tri-County South Conference. But they've got a two-headed monster at running back that's really good. And to be honest, Jeanette was not healthy. And I know Peyton Moulter played. I can't imagine he was anywhere close to 100%. I'm sure no one wants to use that as an excuse, but it's a reality that they were a big strike offense, but you limit their quarterback who kind of orchestrates it all. And we know that Noah Sanders played injured or at least banged up for most of the season. It just feels like if they had everyone healthy, might have been a different story, but that just wasn't the case for a team that was lacking depth.
I think you put it perfectly. The lack of depth really hurt Jeanette in big games. I think that's what happened against Greensburg Central Catholic. They were up by 2 scores in that game. And then in the second half, Greensburg Central Catholic kind of wore them down and ended up winning the game. I know Clareton kind of blew their doors off at the beginning, and so did California. But I think, late in the season as a whole, I think they were worn down a little bit, banged up. You mentioned Peyton Moulter. He played pretty much the entire game, but not every snap. And obviously he wasn't 100%. You give him credit, man. He went out there and he knew that potentially was his last game. So I'm sure he was just laying it on the line and seeing what happens. But, when he's not 100%, he is such a difference maker on both sides of the ball for Jeanette, and not having him 100%, that hurts. Much like Derry, you look at Jeanette, they had a big stepping stone this year, getting back to where they want to be, but by the same token, they're losing Peyton Moulter. They're losing Noah Sanders. So, those are some big losses that they have to replace. And you hope that they can continue to kind of build up that roster and build up that depth. I know that they're not going to build it up to where Jeanette was in, the 2000s and that kind of thing. But you're hoping to get more than whatever they ended up with. My goodness, I know it was 21 at one point.
Yeah.
But Tom Pallone, he's the right man for the job. Great coach. Great young coach, and he's the exact person that the program needs, in that position. So hopefully Jeanette will continue to build that up and make these playoff runs like they did a few years ago.
Those are the games you can go back and watch or listen to on demand, although unfortunately 0 for 3 for Westmoreland County in those contests. Another 5A game, Peters Township shuts out Franklin Regional 35-0. Peters Township has been doing that to everybody this season. There's a reason why they are the number 1 seed. That was an awfully tough task for the Panthers to try to win on the road. And unfortunately for them, they just could not get the offense going against a stifling defense. But offense was not an issue for Greater Latrobe. The Wildcats, I thought it would be a tough test for them to go to West Allegheny, even though West Allegheny was a 4th place team. Greater Latrobe made it just look easy. They dominated right from the get-go. And I don't want to give away the interview with Ron Prady, but let's just say that they seemed extra motivated. And the guy who apparently was the most motivated of anyone in that contest was Johnny Wetzel.
Yeah, I'll let Boomer talk about that. But I know the Wildcats weren't real happy with their seed. I know they wanted a first-round home playoff game and felt that they deserved that. And hey, football, whatever sport you're talking about, especially from the coach's perspective, you're trying anything to motivate the players, whether, it's something that you believe they should be motivated by, or maybe you're trying to conjure something up. I think with this, it was real. I think they truly believed that they should have had a home game. So they went in with that chip on their shoulder, and Johnny Wetzel, was absolutely ridiculous in that game, put up monster numbers we'll talk about here coming up. And, he's just been doing it all season long for them. Tash on defense was all over the place, and they just went in and did it. And, Sean, I give them a lot of credit, because a lot of times when you have a program like Latrobe that does not have much playoff success, when they go up against a team and a program like West Allegheny that has a ton of playoff success, sometimes you're going up against the logo, and mentally you get psyched out a little bit, and that's how you lose. They didn't care. They felt that they were the better team, and they showed it on Friday night.
Well, they're going to need some of that same mentality again this week. We'll get into that, but a terrific performance. Last year it was so important to win that playoff game, but let's be honest. I think it means a little bit more, certainly around the WPIAL for your reputation. If you beat a team like West Allegheny, no knock on Highlands, because Highlands has had some good teams. That's who the Wildcats beat last year. This year, defeating West Allegheny from that great conference with that great tradition of all the championships. I think a lot of people realize that Greater Latrobe is for real in 2023.
And to go on the road and do it convincingly, I mean, that just put the cherry on top for sure for those guys. And don't forget, this is a Latrobe team that has a lot of underclassmen on it.
Yeah.
They're going to be back next year, and
junior heavy.
Still going. Yeah,
absolutely. Unfortunately, the other 4A matchup did not go in favor of our local team. Kiski area just overwhelmed by Thomas Jefferson, 57-13. So the Cavalier season comes to an end. Great run to get to the postseason, but this is sort of what I expected Thomas Jefferson would be doing all season. We saw some of it early when they beat Belle Vernon and destroyed Franklin Regional. They had a couple of slip-ups, but I think they could be as good as anyone in 4A. So we saw the Jaguars in full effect in that victory in 4A. We mentioned it at the onset, tough one for Southmoreland. They were looking for their first ever playoff victory. Instead, it was the opposition who got their first ever postseason win. Deer Lakes 48, Southmoreland 18. We should note, this was mentioned last week in the interview with Tim Bukowski, Ethan Shawley was not eligible. He's a great defensive player. That said, as good as he is, I don't know that you make up 30 points with that. Really tough because it felt like they were, built to kind of get over the hump. They had that 8-9 matchup. They went on the road. They had lost to Deer Lakes earlier in the season at home. This one even more lopsided. So tough way for the Scotty season end, and they will be losing a lot of those great senior skill guys that we've talked about so many times this season. West Mifflin, scores a 40-14 victory over Mount Pleasant. The Vikings hung around in that one, but ultimately second half, the running game was just too much for the Titans. Armon Hill, we talk about him, 214 yards. The Titans had a couple of guys go over 100 yards rushing on that one. So for the Vikings, kind of ended on a disappointing note over the last month or so. They had that loss against Southmoreland in lopsided fashion, and then they fall against West Mifflin. Mohawk shuts out Burrell 42-0. That's not the big story from this game. Unfortunately, the Buccaneers just couldn't get anything going offensively, couldn't slow down Mohawk either. But really kind of an ugly story came out of this game where the Burrell side, Sean Liotta, we knew he got ejected from the game, and we weren't sure exactly what had happened. Well, it came out, I think, a day, maybe 2 days later, that he said he got ejected because he was pointing out that Mohawk players were using racial slurs against some of his players, and he went to the officials and said, this is unacceptable, and probably did not say it in very nice terms to them. So he got tossed, and now we're getting the Burrell side of it, the Mohawk side of it. And the Mohawk perspective, their coach is saying that's not the case, and Burrell started playing dirty. Just, you hate to see it on either side. Now, obviously, Mohawk moves on. They've got another game to worry about. Burrell, the season is over, but I know that this is something that there'll be an investigation, probably findings, but ultimately, this is the last thing you want, win or lose. You don't want a game ever to turn like this.
No, not at all. I mean, there is absolutely, if that is what happened, there's no place for it. And I think the WPIAL hopefully will do a full investigation. Now, will it reveal the truth? I mean, you don't know. I'm sure they'll talk to each head coach. I'm sure they'll talk to the officials as well. I don't know. Maybe they can talk to some players too to see what they say. But I think it would behoove the WPIL to do a full investigation and try their best anyway to get to the bottom of it. Again, maybe they won't find the real truth, but I mean, they have to investigate because there's absolutely no place, if indeed those things were happening, no place for it in high school sports.
Yeah, and again, we don't know the details, certainly. We've gotten different perspectives, different sides. Coach Liotta said the officials told him they didn't hear anything, and so that's why he was so livid. Yeah. I will say this. Him getting tossed, I think every player on his team respects why he did it, if that's what he was hearing or that's what he told was being said, because you need a guy to go to bat for your players, and that's so important, I think, that he did that. Again, it's a bigger story as far as, what the ramifications are of this, and we don't want to speculate either way, but tough way for the season to end. And again, a story that hopefully we will not have to hear anytime again soon for Burl and for Mohawk. Back to the football side of things, Greensburg Central Catholic, one of the teams that did score a victory. Second time this year, they defeated West Green 41-22. They knock off the Pioneers. Really no surprise who was the duo that got it done for GCC, Tyree Turner and Samir Crosby. I talked to JT about this, so I won't steal his thunder, but the fact that those two do it each and every week, when everyone that they go against knows those are the two guys they have to stop, that just speaks to how special that duo is. And by the way, a long, long time coming for GCC. They had such great teams. Well, really last year, they had, I think, a great regular season, shocking playoff loss. So it had been quite a while since they'd won a postseason game, going back more than a decade, when they had such an incredible run for, a 5 or 10 year span.
Yeah, and I remember, I think I referenced this last week, their WPIAL championship and the state championship that they played in and ended up losing to, I think it was Lancaster Catholic, actually, in a snow bowl in Hershey. But yeah, those two guys, I mean, their athleticism is unbelievable. And just because that, Samir is going to be getting the football and Tyree is going to be trying to get it to him. And I mean, he still does. So it really presents a ton of problems for defenses, even though they know where the ball's going sometimes, just because of how athletic they are. And that game with Greensburg Central Catholic and West Green, I mean, it was a fairly close game through the first quarter. GCC scored twice late in the second to go up 20-0 at halftime, and obviously they ran away with it there in the second half. West Green put a long drive together to begin the game and then didn't come up with any points on that long drive. So, and GCC answered back with a pretty quick touchdown. I think it was a 98-yard drive they went on, even though there was only a couple of plays. It was a long touchdown. So, they showed their offensive prowess, certainly in the game against West Green. We've seen it many times on display this year, but it'll certainly be tough this week against Southside Beaver because they're not the top team for no reason.
Absolutely. And we should note, by the way, you have to give credit that they find different ways to get both those guys involved, because Turner can throw it, but they use him creatively to run the football. And then Samir Crosby is a great receiver, but a lot of times he lines up as a running back. So, I mean, they just have different ways to utilize both of them. And we should give credit. The offensive line has been a patchwork. They really don't even have like 5 true offensive linemen, but they've moved guys like Ty Rozier there. Not a natural offensive lineman, but he's getting it done. So, I mean, it's a lot of buy-in, much like we talk about with Jeanette. GCC is having a numbers crunch, and they've had to use different guys in different spots, but they made it work, and they get the first playoff win in the program for over a decade. So congrats to John Thompson and everyone involved in that. Speaking of Southside Beaver, they whitewashed Monessen 39-0. Also, we had a couple of college matchups in Westmoreland County. Seton Hill makes it 3 in a row. Flick, you're wearing the shirt right now.
Right, baby.
Griffins shut out Mercyhurst. If you're a fan of offense, this wasn't the game for you. 14-0. Seton Hill defeats Mercyhurst. Cody Rubrick, former Westmoreland County guy and current Westmoreland County guy, scored a touchdown in that one for the Griffins. They have secured a winning conference record. They'll try to make it a winning overall record this upcoming week. Unfortunately for St. Vincent, there will be no winning record this year, as they dropped a contest against Teal 30-27 in favor of the Tomcats. Let's look at the top performers from the first week of the WPIAL playoffs. This is the top passer, rusher, and receiver across the entire WPIAL, as well as several notable performers here in Westmoreland County. The top passer, it's a familiar name. It's Brad Birch of Gateway, the former Jeanette Jayhawk, 12 of 24 for 254 yards in the Gators' loss. We'll talk about that when we look at the 5A bracket. Not far behind Tyree Turner of Greensburg Central Catholic, as he goes 7 of 11 for 247 yards. Carson Heinley of Kiski area, 9 of 26, but he did throw for 220. Cole Chatfield, 211 yards in the loss for Mount Pleasant. Peyton Moulter, 149 for Jeanette, and Johnny Louver, 146 for Penn Trafford. The top rusher in the WPIAL, well, he came from Westmoreland County. He is Greater Latrobe's John Wetzel, 19 carries for 245 yards in the Wildcats' victory this past week against West Allegheny. Behind him, Dejon Craigett of South Moreland's 146, Tasso Whipple, 115, and Ben Grabowski, 114 the duo for Penn Trafford. And the top receiver, he also came by way of Westmoreland County. Samir Crosby of Greensburg Central Catholic, 4 catches for 131 yards. Dante Gillinardo of Mount Pleasant had 7 grabs for 124. And Noah Sanders in his final game with the Jeanette Jayhawks, 6 receptions for 106 yards.
Don, once again, I think I mentioned this on a past show. The top passer, Brad Birch, some say he should still be at Jeanette, right? Samir Crosby, the top receiver, also from Jeanette. It's just crazy to think that those two could be on the same team right now, along with those other guys. But anyway, I thought that was interesting to point out.
You've just ruined the night for a lot of Jayhawks fans out there. I'm sure.
No, I'm sorry. I am sorry.
Nonetheless, it's okay. We'll forgive you. That'll do it for the rundown of the week that was, the first week of the WPIAL playoffs. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at all the brackets, and we will have 3 interviews. Ron Prady of Greater Latrobe, Matt Humbert of Belle Vernon, and John Thompson of Greensburg Central Catholic. That's as we continue right here on Westmoreland on the Gridiron.
Drive like a champion with Bowser Chevrolet of Monroeville. You're always on the winning team with Bowser Chevrolet. Visit BowserChevrolet.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and get the power of Bowser in your hands. Customize your payments, apply for financing, get a value for your trade and more with the Bowser Express Store. See the full lineup of Chevy cars, trucks, and SUVs at BowserChevrolet.com. Bowser Chevrolet, where the power of Bowser is yours.
Play It Again Sports in Greensburg is your locally owned and operated sporting goods store. We set ourselves apart by offering a wide variety of both new and used equipment at competitive prices. Located in the Greengate East Plaza, below Walmart, Play It Again Sports' knowledgeable staff will help you and your family prepare for every athletic season. Whether you're looking to buy, sell, or trade, we are here as your one-stop shop. At Play It Again Sports in Greensburg, everybody plays.
And we roll along here on another special playoff edition of Westmoreland on the Gridiron. Sean Meyers, Dan Flickinger here on the Westmoreland Sports Network. We ran down all the scores from our Westmoreland County teams last week. We looked at the top performers. Now let's look at the updated brackets across the 6 classifications. Well, we don't need to do 6A because nothing happened last week. There was no games. It's still the 1 versus 4, which is Central Catholic, Mount Lebanon, 2 versus 3, North Allegheny against Cannon McMillan. They will play games this Friday that will determine the championship, which will take place at Norwin High School on November 18th. Also, November 18th, Norwin will be the championship home for the 5A bracket. Let's now look at the updated bracket. We talked about a few of these games. Number 1, Peters Township knocks off Franklin Regional 35-0. Number 5, Moon, a slight upset over number 4, Gateway, as the Tigers advance 35-31. Number 2, Penn Hills takes care of business in a big way, a 63-28 over Penn Trafford, the number 7 seed. And number 3, Pine Richland, dominant against number 6, Bethel Park, 51-6. So, Friday, number 1, Peters against number 5, Moon. That will be at South Fayette High School. Number 2, Penn Hills against number 3, Pine Richland at Martirelli Stadium, which is not at North Hills, but in the North Hills School District. Some really good matchups, although I thought that there'd be really good quarterfinals matchups, and surprisingly, only one of those 4 games was competitive. I will say the Big East did not have a good showing in 5A. The teams went 0 for 3. They are now eliminated. Penn Hills and Pine Richland should be terrific. The John Ladon Bowl, if you will, and then Peters with that great defense against Moon, a team that played in the championship a couple of years ago when they lost to Penn Trafford. So should be some pretty good matchups in 5A. Unfortunately, our team's no longer in it here in Westmoreland County. By the way, I do want to note, Flick.
Go ahead.
I was at Penn Hills.
Yeah.
We also saw Mike White sending a tweet out from Gateway. Eerie how empty the stadiums were right at kickoff on the home side. I really don't have an explanation, but it filled out a little bit on the Penn Hills side. Penn Trafford had an okay turnout, all things considered, but just kind of weird to see the regular season. You get these great raucous crowds, and then the playoffs, at least early in the playoffs, it just wasn't there.
I don't even know how to explain it, because the weather, I mean, it was a fall night or whatever, but it wasn't like raining or snowing or
Warmer than you would
windy.
expect. Honestly, it was perfectly fine.
Crisp, cold fall temperatures, but you see crowds for other games when it's that cold. So I really don't understand. That's really strange. I do want to at least promote the fact that well, first of all, and I'm jumping ahead for sure, but we will be broadcasting Greensburg Central Catholic and Southside Beaver from Peters Township on our website, westmorelandsports.com. You can watch it for free. However, Sean and John Bainbridge will be working as part of the NFHS network on Friday, and they, along with Matt Palumbo, will be there too. They will be broadcasting the Penn Hills Pine Richland game. That will be on NFHS only. So we have a relationship with NFHS. We just streamed all of the soccer championships for them. So the Penn Hills Pine Richland game, Sean and John will be doing that. Yes, it's out of Westmoreland County, but they asked if we could help out, and we're going to do that. And then, of course, one of our Westmoreland teams, Greensburg Central Catholic and Southside Beaver, John Flickinger, Roger Downs, and myself will be there. Hayden will even be there, Sean.
Nice.
Along with Ricky Pitzer, and we'll have that game as a free broadcast right to our website. So we're happy to work with both sides here and continue to cover Westmoreland County and sometimes WPIAL in general.
Yeah, and I think me and my background. I've always been a guy that I don't have a home team per se. I love just doing these games, and I prep the same for all
Your
of them.
home team didn't make it in the playoffs. That's why.
Oh, I guess Plum is what you're referring to. That would be
or your
my
former
alma mater.
hometown team.
Yes.
Hometown team, I guess we'll say.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm excited about that one. Should be a really, really good matchup, and there's plenty of intriguing storylines as well. But yeah, 5A I think is always one of the brackets I most look forward to. Disappointed with the fact that there was only one good game, came down to the wire in Monroeville. But I think that these two semis could be really, really good. 4A should be good as well. Let's look at the bracket here. Now, this bracket did have 3 byes, so 3 teams will be playing for the first time this week, one of which is the top overall seed, Aliquip Equips. Who will they be playing? The Greater Latrobe Wildcats, courtesy of their 39-7 victory at West Allegheny, as number 9 advances over number 8. Number 4, Mars, scores a 44-19 victory over Chartiers Valley. The Fighting Planets will go against Central Valley. Central Valley, the number 5 seed, defeated Highlands 28-7. That matchup will be at Ambridge High School. Other side of the bracket, McKeesport, the number 2 seed, got a bye, which means they will host number 10 Trinity, because the Hillers, this is unbelievable. Number 10 Trinity wins 49-0 against number 7 North Catholic. Now there's upsets, and then there's completely dominating as an underdog. So the Hillers win.
Well, one
49.
team was certainly upset after that game.
Yeah, geez Louise, 49-0. That is unbelievable. That will take place, as we mentioned, at McKeesport. Number 3, Montour, also had a bye. That means the Spartans will host Thomas Jefferson, the number 6 seed. They won convincingly against Kiski-area, 57-14. So Aliquippa, Greater Latrobe, Mars, Central Valley, McKeesport, Trinity, Montour, TJ. The only one that's at a neutral site is 4 versus 5. That is Mars and Central Valley at Ambridge. We're going to hear from Ron Prady, the head coach for Greater Latrobe, momentarily. I always talk about 5A being loaded. I feel like 4A is pretty darn loaded. Aliquippa, number 1 seed. McKeesport's had a great season. Montour. Thomas Jefferson, for a while, I thought maybe was the best team. Central Valley, we know, year in and year out, they're contending for titles. And then there's a couple of teams in Greater Latrobe and Trinity that are trying to break through in their own right. Pretty surprising that they took care of business as convincingly as they did, but it speaks to the dominance of that conference. The Big 7, Greater Latrobe, Trinity both dominate. Thomas Jefferson dominates, and the team that didn't play happens to be the number 2 seed in the entire bracket in McKeesport. So sometimes once you get into the playoffs, you root for the other teams that you were in a conference with. And I'm sure Ron Prady and crew appreciate that the other teams from that Big 7 took care of business in a big way.
Yeah, I absolutely love the bracket. I think it's going to be thrilling. I think someone's going to get upset. You have the 2 wild cards. Heck, Trinity, beat Thomas Jefferson earlier in the year. TJ seems to have righted the ship now as a number 6 seed. You have Latrobe and Trinity as wild cards. You have Aliquippa being the odds-on favorite, the powerhouse. You mentioned, Montour and then the other team. So I think it should be, and McKeesport, of course, too. I mean, geez, oh man, it's really going to be interesting. And I know that's a cliche.
And the Mars Fighting Planets.
It really will be.
Don't forget Mars with Eric Kasparovich.
That's right.
So, it's absolutely stacked top to bottom. Well, no one has a bigger challenge than Greater Latrobe, because not only do they play the number 1 seed, they have to go to what was formerly the Pit, now is Heinz Field. That is the home venue for the Aliquippa.
By the way,
Clips.
I love when you read like a preview or they talk about Aliquippa's field, they always have to put, when they put Heinz Field, they have to put like Aliquippa's Heinz Field. So no one gets confused or anything like that, even though it's called Acrisure Stadium now. But
yeah, but realistically, I think the joke's been made, but it's really more truth than joke. Aliquippa had been to Heinz Field so many times that it's only fitting that their field is called Heinz Field now, right?
Might as well.
Yeah. A stiff test. Aliquippa has a dominant team in every facet. They have a Penn State commit in Tyke Hayes, but it's more than just him. We saw him when he was a freshman defeat Belle Vernon area in the championship. They are absolutely loaded. So as good as Greater Latrobe was against West Allegheny, they're going to have to be even better to try to knock off Aliquippa, but I think they embrace that opportunity. And as I said, Ron Prady has done such a great job. I wouldn't put anything past him. Let's now hear from the second-year head coach for Greater Latrobe, the one and only Ron Prady. First off, Ron, congratulations. A massive victory. I know you said that it would kind of validate your program and what you've been able to do over the last couple of years. The job's certainly not done, but how good did that feel on Friday night?
It felt good. I think we played a pretty clean game, both offensively and defensively, special teams too. It was a dominant performance defensively, especially in that first half. I think they had one rushing yard in the first half and 2 first downs. But the offense complemented too. We scored every time we had the ball in the first half, 1 field goal. And I think we maximized our possessions and it was a lot of fun. Kids were well prepared. They played hard, and we were happy to come out with a win.
I know that John Wetzel's had a really good season on both sides of the football, but it seemed like maybe he had his finest performance, at least offensively. Didn't have to throw it a ton. Certainly, he was able to do a little bit through the air, but mostly on the ground, rushing for well over 200 yards. Was that part of the plan coming in, and how did he ultimately step up and deliver?
Well, it was. I think he hit a huge pass on the first series. I think it was 3rd and 8, and hit with Jaton. Hit one to Jaton about.
We got a cameo appearance here, huh?
Yeah, Fez is here. He hit one to Jaton on that first series, put us down around the 10-yard line. We were able to score, but that was a huge 3rd down throw and catch. Jaton went up over a kid and made a great play. Otherwise, we're punting there, and who knows what happens, but. That was a huge throw. And then a lot of John's runs, we thought going in, John would run the ball a ton, Alex would run the ball, Brady would get carries too. But, it just kind of ended up being John. A lot of them were on scrambles, some design runs, but he was really fantastic Friday. And he's been that way all year. Like you said, offensively and defensively. Just a really, really great player.
Now, your defense, as you mentioned, pitched a shutout until the 4th quarter against what's obviously a pretty competent West Allegheny squad. They did lose their quarterback, and I think some of that was with the physicality that your team played with. How much did that impact how the game played out, and what in particular stood out about your defense?
Well, I think you mentioned the physicality. I mean, there were some punishing hits. The quarterback, everything they do runs through him. And he's a great player, but Alex put a hit on him that was unbelievable, and John did too. Coming off the edge one time, and then the number 2 quarterback, Alex. Unfortunately, the kid got hurt, and they carted him off. But it was a physical game. Our guys were hitting, and they were excited to play, which was great to see.
Well, you mentioned a physical game, so obviously. Once you get this deep in the season, no one's probably really 100%. But even specifically after a game like that, how is everyone feeling, and how do you feel like the bodies are holding up at this point of the year?
Well, it was a normal soreness Saturday morning, the bumps and bruises, but fortunately nothing of significance at this point. We feel really lucky that we're going into this game healthy. So yeah, every Saturday morning our guys are sore, but they get a workout in, and that seems to help them recover a little bit and hopefully be ready for practice on Monday.
Well, we're going to talk about the opponent up next momentarily because it's obviously a major hurdle. But the fact that you knocked off West Allegheny, a team that has this great tradition, a team that obviously was highly valued by the WPIAL football committee since they got the home game. Did you sense that there was any extra motivation for your squad going in, knowing the circumstances?
I think there certainly was some. I think our kids were irritated by the fact that we didn't get a home game. And I think they fed off of that a little bit, maybe a lot. But, sometimes those things factor into how you play too. And, they kept their emotions in check, but certainly played with a ton of energy and played fast and were physical. So we were happy on both sides of the ball to do what we did against, like you said, a really good football team and a great program.
We talked about Johnny Wetzel and Alex Tash and Jaton Williams. You mentioned Brady Prohovic as well running the football. Was there anyone else that was kind of an unsung hero in that victory?
Well, I think our defensive line and linebackers were played exceptionally well that week. It's Timmy Meyers and Cody Crawl and Caleb Lehman and Jared Bailey are the guys that kind of man our front. And then the linebackers with Alex and John, but also Chris Cochran played great. Jack Drenovich played great. Braden Bronson was great again. Those guys have been solid for us all year, and they made a ton of plays for us on defense and made things difficult for West Allegheny, which, is a very good offense. But I think we did a great job making things tough for them.
Did you feel as though last year's experience in the playoffs had a direct correlation to this year?
I think maybe a little bit. I think, the preparation was great last week, and our guys, I think, understood the urgency that you have to play with in the playoffs to get a win. And I think we did that right out of the gate. Last year, we were a little bit slow when we were at Highlands coming out. Played a great second half. But this week, I think we came out of the gate and, our guys were ready to play. And that's how you have to do it in the playoffs. It's tough to get behind and come back against a good team like that. So we were fortunate to jump on top and then stay on top.
You mentioned it was a physical game, but your team seems, by and large, none the worse for wear for it. But I would say that a team that has a bye probably is feeling a little bit better physically. That's the case with Aliquippa, the number 1 seed, did not play last week. How much of a difference do you think that makes? And do you think there's any advantage for your team having just played this prior week?
Well, in high school, I'm not sure. I think it helps them to rest and heal a little bit, have that off week, and they certainly earned that. But by the same token, at this point, it's the week before the game. We're all preparing, and I'm not sure that unless they had guys banged up that they were able to get back and heal some bumps and bruises. We didn't mind playing last week, and we're looking forward to Friday.
Well, before we get into some of the specifics and the standouts for Aliquippa, the name itself, obviously, everyone around Western Pennsylvania knows about Aliquippa football. They've been to Heinz Field or Acrisure Stadium every year for basically the stadium's existence, it feels like. How much of a focus is it to make sure that you don't lose already before the game starts just because it's against Aliquippa and their reputation?
Well, that's half the battle. I think a lot of teams are beat before you even take the field against those guys. So we like our group. We like the fact that they weren't intimidated to go to West Allegheny, and I'm not sure that we'll be intimidated to go to Aliquippa. It's still going to be a tough game. I mean, they're obviously everything that you just mentioned. They're a great program and a great team this year. So we recognize that challenge, but I don't know that our guys will be intimidated. We're just going to go play.
I'm sure they do a lot of things really, really well to get to this point, the undefeated record, the number 1 seed. What do they do best? What most stands out when you look at this year's version?
Well, you got to look at the running back. He's pretty special. Committed to Penn State. He's elusive. He's quick. He's fast. He's powerful. he's everything you want in a back. And, if Penn State likes him, he's got to be pretty darn good. But they're good up front, too. They come off the ball. They're physical. They get in your way. They run their feet. And their quarterback is he can really sling it. And he's accurate back there, and he'll run a little bit with his feet, but he likes to stand back there and throw the ball. And he throws it to some guys that are pretty talented, too.
You talked about Tyke Hayes, the Penn State commit, closing in on 1,200 yards this season. He was the featured running back as a freshman when they won a WPIAL title a few years ago. But John Tracy in their backfield also has made some headlines. I believe he had a game where he scored 5 touchdowns 5 different ways. How much of a challenge is it when they have not just one guy that potentially could come out of the backfield, but 2? And do you see situations where they use both of them simultaneously?
Well, there's been a few times they've used them both, but not a ton. It just seems like when they want to spell, the Hayes kid, they'll bring the other kid in. But they're both special, and certainly, our attention's going to be on the run game, stopping those 2 guys, which nobody has done. And I don't know that we're going to stop them. You just have to kind of make them drive the field on you, not give up the big play is the hope. Easier said than done for sure, but that's what we're going to try to do.
How about the other side of the football? What do they do well on defense, and what do you need to do on offense to continue, I guess, the pace that you set this past week?
Well, they create a ton of turnovers over there, and a ton of scores off of those turnovers too. And there's been games, they're 3, 4, 5 minutes into the game, and they've already scored 2 defensive touchdowns, and their offense hadn't even touched the ball yet. So those guys thrive off of turnovers, forcing fumbles and scooping and scoring. So we're going to have to take care of the football and try to eat up the clock a little bit, keep the ball away from their offense. For to have any success, I think that's how you have to do it.
Last part is special teams, of course. I know that it's going to be difficult in offense and defense. Is there anything you can do in that third phase to maybe tip the scales in your favor?
Oh, I hope to get the ball into Jaton's hands. People tend to kick away from him. But no, we just have to be solid there. I don't know. They have some guys back there at return kicks too that are dangerous. So we got to be smart with our placement of the ball on kickoffs and punts. Otherwise, they'll sting you there too. So they're great on all 3 phases. It's certainly going to be a challenge, but one that we're looking forward to.
Lastly, I guess it's still technically called the Pit, but the Heinz Field, as it's now known for Aliquippa, you're heading into their home because they had that first round bye. They get to host this one. What's that going to be like, and what do you tell your team directly before you arrive to the field and then get ready to head out there for the opening kickoff?
Well, we're going to remind them that we're there to play a football game, and that's all that really matters. You can take it in and look around a little bit, but it's just like Memorial Stadium, other than the grass, at Memorial and turf there. But we're there to play a football game, and that's going to be our focus. And we're going to try to keep our kids, concentrated on that fact and go out and play as well as we can. And we'll see what happens then.
Well, Ron, thank you so much for doing this. Congrats again on another playoff victory, 2 playoff wins in as many years. Hopefully you can make it one more this Friday night.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Sean.
That is Ron Prady, head coach of Greater Latrobe. We'll continue after this on Westmoreland on the Gridiron.
The hybrid operating room, the most advanced surgical environment in medicine. It's a new horizon for minimally invasive endovascular and cardiac surgeries. The hybrid OR provides unparalleled imaging in the operating room. For patients, that means a shorter procedure, less recovery time, and reduced risk for complications. Independence Health System. Expert care here.
I feel like it's definitely very important, for high school, because a lot of kids, get peer pressured into drinking and doing drugs. So, doing the events, in a school setting, I feel like definitely, try to prevent kids from, going to, parties and drinking and driving and doing drugs and being peer pressured.
We just want to talk about the dangers of the substance abuse in our community, and we want to help be a part of stopping that.
And we welcome you back to the special second playoff edition of Westmoreland on the Gridiron. We appreciate Boomer for taking the time. By the way, we appreciate the cameo from Fez as well. Second week in a row that Ron Prady had his whole crew around him when he did this interview. So I'm sure they were giving him a hard time again. And then this time Fez he wasn't going to wait for the interview to end before he walked across and sat down.
I heard when James Franklin landed his helicopter, Fez was out to greet him, and Franklin was actually stumbling over his words because it was such an honor to meet him.
Nervous.
So,
Yeah, I believe it. Again, hope that they compete against Aliquippa. If they somehow win, it will be legitimately the biggest story of the year in the WPIAL for football. It would be a massive, massive upset, but I think that they're going to learn a lot from that environment, and we'll see how they come out. I really do think that they will at least hang tough for a half, if not longer.
I don't think they'll be intimidated, Sean, especially going. I know West Allegheny's on Aliquippa, but they're still, again, that program, the whole mental thing, as I talked about earlier in the show, they cleared that hurdle easily. It didn't bother them. So I know Aliquippa is a different dog. I get it. But I don't think they're going to be intimidated going into that game.
Well, let's look at the 3A bracket, and we'll start with the team that intimidates a lot of its opponents, and that is the number 1 seed Belle Vernon Area Leopards. We'll hear from Matt Humbert momentarily. So they get the benefit of a bye. Now they head into action against the number 8 seed Deer Lakes, and so that will be at James Weir Stadium, the beach, at Belle Vernon, as they host the Lancers, who defeated Southmoreland 48-18. Number 4 East Allegheny also had a bye. So the Wildcats will welcome number 12 South Park, who upset number 5 Knox 37-20. Number 2 Avonworth, coming off of its first round bye, welcomes number 7 Beaver Area, 42-7 victors against number 10 Shadyside Academy. And third seeded Elizabeth Forward opens the postseason at home against number 6 West Mifflin. The Titans with a 40-14 victory over Mount Pleasant Area. Before we welcome in Matt Humbert, just a quick look at this one. Really, everyone will tell you the heavy favorite is Belle Vernon Area. Can a team challenge them? I talked to someone, actually it was Josh Taylor, when I was at the Fan, and he saw both Belle Vernon and Avonworth this year. He covered both those teams. He thinks that Avonworth can hang with Belle Vernon. He wasn't saying that they were going to win, but he thinks that could be a real good game. Last year is the championship game, and I thought one that Belle Vernon was pretty clearly better than, although they didn't dominate. It seems like it could be a collision course. We'll see if anyone can put a wrinkle in that. One team to keep an eye on, West Mifflin, because no one's got a hotter hand right now than Armand Hill.
Yeah, when you have a difference maker like that, he gets into a game, he can take it over. So that'll certainly be, a wrench, I guess, thrown into a game where West Mifflin, may normally not be favored in and probably won't be favored, against an Avonworth or a Belle Vernon. But when you throw him in there, you never know what can happen. I mean, he's just been absolutely tearing it up all season long. So we'll see what happens as we go down, the list here. But Belle Vernon, I mean, we saw them, Sean, against Elizabeth Forward, maybe a little bit banged up. Some guys, I know Braden Locks has been dealing with some things, the last couple of weeks, but maybe now they're nice and fresh. And if they can get up quickly on Deer Lakes, it's a case of where maybe guys can get out early in the game as well to stay fresh. It's such a big advantage to have that bye, certainly in the first round of playoffs.
And the Lancers have plenty of skill, but we've seen teams with plenty of skill before go against Belle Vernon and find out that they can't really do much of anything, because Southmoreland had this issue when they went against Belle Vernon, just really couldn't get anything going. Their quarterback, Tim Burke, is plenty good, as Mark Katarski would say.
He is, yeah.
They've got good receivers. They got a good running back in Williams, but can they do anything against the Leopards, who have really just dominated pretty much everyone that they've played in Class 3A for a couple of years now? We'll see. I can tell you one thing. Matt Humbert is not taking it lightly. He and all his players still know the goal is to win a WPIAL championship, and if they're able to do that, then a state championship again. But to get there, they can't look past anyone, and that includes number 8, Deer Lakes. Let's now hear from Matt Humbert, the head coach of Belle Vernon Area. First off, Matt, I know getting to the playoffs, it's now the most exciting time of year for you, for the fans, and certainly for the players, but you had the benefit of getting the bye. So what did you do during the off week to prepare for a postseason run once again?
Well, we've been fortunate enough to have a bye the past few years, and we love the bye because it allows us to clean up some different things that maybe fall by the wayside. It allows you to kind of go back and look at some fundamentals and try to tidy up those things. So we were able to, I think, squeeze as much out of the orange as we possibly could. Got a couple more opportunities to lift the kids, get a little bit more film and fundamental stuff. And then we were able to kind of throw a lot of different looks at them defensively and offensively. But I will say this is probably the first year that by Friday, I was a little antsy, kind of wanting the game. So we still would prefer the bye week. Allows you to get healthy, allows you to clean up some stuff and work on some things. But I think this was the first year that, we were kind of a little antsy and not saying that we would have enjoyed playing on that Friday, but I think everyone was ready to go.
Well, you said it allows you to get healthy. I know at one stretch during the season, you had a lot of key guys out, but it seemed like most of them came back for the last few games, certainly the game against Elizabeth Ford. But talking to the players, and maybe even from your own experience, how much of a difference does that make in terms of the body feeling right for these guys to get a full week off?
Yeah, I mean, and the nice thing is we were able to really condition them hard last week because I didn't see any lingering effects from the season. And usually you get to a point right now where you're pretty beat up, and sometimes you're beat up physically and mentally. But I think, the gratifying thing of last week was I think everybody's, in pretty good shape. This is the first week that we're, I would quote, truly healthy. We haven't been too behind the eight ball with injuries this season. Last year we had some early season injuries, but with the exception of one, we were able to overcome them and have kids back come playoff time. So, I think the big question mark was Braden last week because that was the first game that he really would play with his finger. And obviously he didn't show any signs of that at all. And he's pretty much, at 100% strength right now with everything. So, it allowed us to kind of get healthy, but it also allowed us to kind of, condition the kids and work them out pretty hard.
I know I talked to you before the Elizabeth Forward game, and obviously you're looking big picture. You wanted to win another championship or multiple championships, but there is significance in winning a conference title as well, and that allowed you to get the number 1 seed. What were your takeaways from that victory against EF, and how significant was that for the program's goals?
I think it was, obviously the step in terms of where we want to go. A little disappointed when you see 28 points on the board. 6 of them were on the offensive side. So, when you take that away, Elizabeth Ford's a good football team. I think I think defensively, if we could have that game back, we would have prided ourselves that maybe we wouldn't have let 28 points go, but then at the same time they kind of earn those 28 points and they're a good football club. I think the gratifying thing is the storyline for us over the past year or so is our defense has kind of bailed us out most of the time. It was nice to see the offense really kind of step up, and when we needed to score, we scored. And I think it was a good challenge and a good test for our defense. I mean, our defense wasn't really tested over the past 3 weeks, so I think that was good for them to kind of be in a game where it wasn't very comfortable going into the second quarter, and that's kind of how it's been over the past 3 weeks. So at the end of the day, it was a good team victory for us. I think there's a lot of bright spots because I do think Elizabeth Ford is a really good football team. They got 2 defensive linemen. They're probably the best that we'll see all year. Gratifying to get that conference, and obviously the cherry on top of that conference comes with a high seed. It comes with 5 weeks. So I mean, that's truly what you're fighting for. As much as you're trading for a conference championship, you're fighting for advantageous seeding, and you're fighting for a bye week.
4 teams in the bracket got buys. You, the number 1 seed. I don't think that was much of a surprise. Avonworth 2, EF 3, and then East Allegheny 4. Just as a whole, how did the bracket play out compared to what your expectations were?
I think it was pretty accurate. I think, we have a lot of bracketologists on my staff that like to sit around on napkins and draw up what they think that it'll look like. But in all honesty, no joke, all joking aside, I think it kind of fell where we kind of predicted it. It's one of those things where, as much as you want to peek and peel back that layer and look to the stadium with the yellow seats and kind of focus on that, the narrative all off season, that is the narrative in the season, that's the ultimate achieving goal. At the end of the day, the nice thing is you can kind of put all that on pause, and you don't really have to focus on that. You kind of declutter your mind frame, yourself as a coach and the players, because if you can't win this Friday, then there is no game at Pittsburgh. So it's one of those things where, we really just try to do our best to declutter all that and try to block out all that noise and just really try to enjoy every moment of practice and be overly prepared for the game on Friday, because at the end of the day, that's really all that counts.
Deer Lakes will be your opponent, the first ever postseason win in program history after they knock off Southmoreland, and they were impressive in doing so. Deer Lakes has got some real offensive weapons. When you look at their performance in that game and then throughout the season, what jumps out about the Lancers?
I think their quarterback, reminds me eerily similar of the Hostein kid from Central Martinsburg last year that we faced in the PIAA semifinals. I think his pocket presence is phenomenal. He stays in there and he doesn't get rattled, and he can move laterally, vertically. And then when he moves laterally, vertically, he doesn't necessarily take off. He still makes a poised throw, and then he can obviously hurt you with his legs. So I think their passing attack is probably what impresses me the most when it comes to them. Defensively, they're solid. They're going to show you multiple looks. They got a really good defensive tackle and end in number 55. So, it's definitely a game that, I think maybe some people looking at it, might just expect, easy sledding for us moving forward. And we're not really looking at that. I think Deer Lakes is a good football team. I think they're very well balanced offensively and defensively, and the discrepancies are not really that apparent. So I think we're going to get a good football team that's riding high off their first playoff win ever, coming to the beach on Friday, and we need to be able to batten down the hatches and we need to be able to perform.
Does a quarterback who is a coach's son look different on film?
I don't know. I don't really factor that too much into it. I know that he's a 4-year starter. I know that's the coach's kid. I think everything goes through him. He is the DNA and he is the heartbeat of that offense. He makes plays. They have big, tall receivers. They're physical receivers too. So, I think the nucleus and the strength of their team is obviously quarterback receiving tandem. And they run some good schemes that kind of put some stress on secondaries and linebackers. So, this is a great week for us to really be disciplined in our eye reads and not focus on the eye candy that they provide. And this is a great week for our defensive line, our front four, to try to bottle up and keep that kid in the pocket and not let him get loose, but then at the same time make it uncomfortable for him. So great challenge defensively, and then offensively, it's always a challenge when you have a team that shows you different defensive looks and tries to throw some different things at you. They're a heavy blitz team, so that's something that obviously we need to be prepared for as well.
And the fact that you get the number 1 seed, the bye, now that means you have a home game in the quarterfinals. How significant is that to be playing on?
It's huge. It's a huge motivating factor, especially for the seniors. You don't want to travel that first game. And, the narrative is we'll play anywhere at any time at any place. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that those seniors get that one last opportunity at home. And so, again, the conference championship and how it falls being the last game of the season is always big. And you always want to take that first benchmark into your journey. But again, it goes beyond that conference championship. It goes to a home playoff game, a bye, and an advantageous seeding in the playoffs. So, I think that's the true, cherry on top that you're striving for. But, we got a lot of respect for Deer Lakes coming in here. And, we got a lot of respect for the process that takes place in playoff football. And, it's one of those things where that expiration date is going to be up for one of the teams on a Friday night all across the state of Pennsylvania. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that that's not us.
Well, Matt, congrats on the great regular season. I know the most exciting time of year now for the entire Belle Vernon community to start the postseason once again.
And we got some good weather for it. So hopefully it stays true to that. So we're looking forward to that.
And we appreciate Matt Humbert for taking the time. I know it's the time of year where he and I pretty much talk every week, probably for, hopefully from his perspective, for the next month or so, because that means that they're playing for probably a state title. He knows exactly at this point, not that he didn't 5 years ago, but certainly now that he's been through and gone on to win WPIAL and state titles, he knows exactly what buttons to press, how to get a team ready coming off of a bye. And he mentioned, they really used it to kind of ratchet up the intensity a little bit this past week, even though they were on a bye. They weren't sitting around and resting and taking it easy, because he had a good feel for what his team needs. And I think that is important as opposed to maybe some coaches who are going through this for the first time.
What do you think he was yelling in practice? He doesn't even know, right?
Yeah, I know he was intense. That's a safe bet that he was intense leading up to this game. So should be, a decent test for them. I'm sure that the Leopards are going to pass it with flying colors. But again, you can't take anything for granted. They know that they're at the point of the year now where they're going to be having to play their best football. And even in some wins, they did not play perfect. They have some areas to clean up. We'll see if they do that starting on Friday night against the Lancers. Let's now look at the 2A bracket. Unfortunately, no Westmoreland County teams left in this one. We'll start at the top. The number 1 seed, Steel Valley Ironmen. They had a bye last week. They will host number 9 Western Beaver, which knocked off Sarah Catholic 38-21. Amani Christian Academy moves on to the quarters as well. They dominated number 13 Waynesburg Central. 4-seeded Saints winning 52-14. They will play against number 5 Mohawk. We mentioned Mohawk defeated Burrell 42-0. So 4 versus 5. That matchup will be at a neutral site. It will be at Moon High School. Number 2 Neshannock will open its postseason after a first-round bye by hosting the number 10 Beaver Falls. As the Beaver Falls squad, the Tigers upsetting number 7 Keystone Oaks 20-7. And number 3 Washington defeating Elwood City 48-6. That means that the Little Prexies will go against number 6 McGuffey as the Highlanders 25-13 victors over number 11 Derry. Number 3 Washington, number 6 McGuffey. That will be at Cannon McMillan High School. We mentioned 2 teams coming off of byes, so 2 home games for Steel Valley and Neshannock respectively. The other 2, Amani and Mohawk, Washington and McGuffey, will be at neutral sites. By the way, 2A, much like 3A and 4A, championships will be the day after Thanksgiving, November 24th, down at the Acrisure Stadium. Let's wrap up now with the 1A bracket, and we will hear from JT momentarily, the head coach of Greensburg Central Catholic. His team will be going against the number 1 overall seed, Southside Beaver, Southside area, whatever you want to call them.
Southside School District.
Yeah, call them the number 1 seed. And they lived up to that 39-0 over Monessen this past week. Greensburg Central Catholic, number 8 seed, moves on courtesy of their 41-22 victory against West Green. That means number 1 Southside, number 8 GCC will be at Peters Township. Again, we will have a broadcast of that right here on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Same side of the bracket, number 4 Clairton moves on 44-7, knocking off Laurel. The Bears will go against the defending champion, number 5 Union. The Scotties defeated Burgettstown 51-37 in a high-scoring affair. So Clairton and Union will battle at Armstrong High School. Other side of the bracket, number 2 Fort Cherry advances 50-16, knocking off number 15 Jefferson Morgan. And Fort Cherry will go against Rochester. The number 10 seed gets a slight upset over number 7 Cornell, 20-19 in overtime in favor of the Rams. So Rangers and Rams will do battle at West Allegheny. And Bishop Canevin, number 3, advances courtesy of a very dominant 49-6 victory against 14-seeded Leechburg. The Crusaders will go against the California area Trojans, who ousted Jeanette 44-7. Bishop Canevin and California will play in Westmoreland County. They will be at Norwin High School on Friday. So Peters Township, Armstrong, West Allegheny, and Norwin, the venues in this one. Again, we're going to hear from John Thompson, but Flick, looking at this, no doubt GCC gets that big playoff win, but a stiff test in front of them. Well, enough of us talking. Let's now hear from the true expert, the first-year head coach of Greensburg Central Catholic. Here's JT, John Thompson, talking about his Centurions. First off, JT, I know it's a big accomplishment to win a playoff game in your first year, but for the Centurions as a program, as I mentioned, it had been more than a decade. What did that moment feel like, and what was the celebration like for you, for the players, and even for some alumni, I would assume?
It was great. To get the win and with, I'm not saying there was a lot of pressure, but you do feel that, when people are excited about it, we made the playoffs and then have opportunity to play in that game. I was feeling pressure, honestly, and I think we played that way a little bit, even with the kids, where you try to keep them composed and, especially with a familiar opponent. And we played a little bit tight, but at the end of the day, we're able to make enough plays to win the game. And I've had a lot of people reaching out to me and congratulating me and us as a team and the coaching staff. And And it's nice. It's awesome, but we're not done. We're still looking forward to obviously a huge challenge this week.
41-22, the final score against West Green. And typically the 8-9 matchup, you figure is going to be one of the most evenly pitted, but your team was able to jump out to a 4-score lead. How important was that to be able to play from ahead in the game?
Very important. I knew it was going to be a different type of game, heading into it, but the turnovers that we were able to cause the first game that we played them, and then again, our big play offense showed up, this game. And defensively, we didn't give up a lot of points, gave up a lot of yards, but, I guess that's at the end of the day, it's what matters. It's, the score on the scoreboard. So, but yeah, it was, I forgot what you asked me, man.
It was about playing from ahead. And you mentioned you gave up some yards, but I guess that's kind of a luxury you're afforded when you have a 27-0 lead like you did.
Yeah. That helps. It helps. It helps kind of take the pressure off, but at the same time, defensively, you still got to get your stops when you're playing from ahead.
Well, I would imagine at this point of the year, there's not a whole lot of secrets that Tyree Turner and Samir Crosby are your two go-to guys, but they continue to put up big numbers and make big plays and score touchdowns. They did that, of course, against the Pioneers. How do they keep doing this, knowing that the game plan of every opposition is to try to slow them down?
They just keep doing it. They keep making those plays, and then we'll sprinkle in one, here or there. Like Aiden Allison had a big 79-yard touchdown reception, which is a huge play for us. And they are football players, those kids, and they're smart and they are elusive. So the talent takes over at that point when, they're loading up the box on, it sounds weird, but against Tyree in the quarterback run game, or, then they do that and we're able to throw the ball down the field and hit Samir on some big plays. So, and also some other receivers that, that, like I said, with Aiden, Landon Honick out there, Evan Stasko. So we've got guys that can catch the ball and make plays out there as well. But, when number 12 gets the ball in his hands, pretty special himself. So
I know at this point of the year, no team is truly 100%, but you've been battling with, injuries and a small roster all along. Now, 3 months into the season, how is everyone holding up? And do you feel like you still are in a good spot in terms of the depth, knowing that you had a small roster to start the season with?
Yeah, we're holding in there. We're hanging in there. They're getting their treatments. They're taking, trying to take care of their bodies as best as possible. We're still missing, that depth, I guess you could say, because of some of those injuries. But and bumps and bruises, and it's being smart is trying to be as a coaching staff to limit the what we're doing in practice, but still being efficient and effective to our game plans and what we need to do to win the game.
Well, you're going to have to probably play pretty close to perfect to win this next game. You're going against the number 1 seed in the bracket, that being Southside or Southside Beaver, Southside area, whatever they go by. It's a few different names, but one thing that we do know is that they're very, very good. They're 11-0 this season. So when you pop in the film, what's the first thing that jumps out?
They play fast. They're very, just looking at their offense to start. You could tell they've been running this, style of offense for a long time, and they're good at it. They play hard. They play fast. They run the ball, and they run the ball well. And they're patient with what they do, and their offensive line, they don't look like the biggest kids in the world, but they're good. They come off the ball and then they'll get into you. And the running backs are good. I have three or four different kids that can run the football, and defensively, they're fast as well. And they're pretty simple with what they do, but they're good at it. And like I said, across the board, they're starting 11, whoever they put on the field are comfortable and confident in their schemes and execute it pretty well.
Well, looking at their record and their schedule at this point, it seems like just about every single week in the regular season, they're giving up 6 or 7 points. And then they get a shutout for the first time last week against Monessen, a Monessen team that's got some pretty explosive players. What challenges does that defense present, and what do you have to do on the other side to have success against it?
Yeah, that's one thing on Saturday morning, we looked at the stats. I'm like, geez, man, they're only giving up 6-7 points a game. And obviously concerning to, us and our offensive staff who, got to give them props to Aaron Detweiler, Zach Cooper, Kirk McMullen, those guys, Sergio Bell, that have been doing an awesome job on our offensive side of the ball, putting game plans together to try to, take advantages of weaknesses or attack weaknesses that defensive show that they show us. I've got to take I've been concentrating on the offense so far the last couple nights and days, so I got to take a look at their defense. I did take a peek at it, and like I said, with what jumped off the screen for me earlier, it is the speed and physicalness that they play with. So we got to try to find something that will work to help put points on the board.
I know you said that they like to run the football, and the statistics bear that out, but their quarterback, Brody Almashi's thrown for about 800 yards. Also, he's a running threat. He's scored over a dozen touchdowns. Is it fair to say that their passing game is enough of a threat that you can't ignore it and just load up to try to stop the run? And what will be key on the defensive side for your squad?
Discipline. Yeah, no question. I mean, it was the same with West Green last week. I mean, they were the same, I guess, type of philosophy. They want to run the ball, and then they'll hit you every once in a while with a pass downfield, and that's the same thing Southside will do. And so it's that mentality of discipline that we need to keep, in doing our jobs up front with our front 7 or 8, and our back 3 or 4, that we put back to defend the pass, and then be extra hitters in the run. So that's going to be my biggest message this week, is that, is playing physical, playing disciplined, and understanding and doing our jobs, so that, we can get that settled in and comfortable with what they're seeing and what we're going to try to run. We'll give ourselves a chance.
Lastly, I mentioned before, it's the first time in more than a decade that GCC claimed a playoff victory. So some of these players were, barely beyond toddler age when GCC last won a playoff game. Now you have that, I would assume, confidence that has continued to grow after a game like that. Where's the team's mindset, and how do you approach heading to play a number 1 team in Southside in a neutral site in Peters Township that's a bit of a hike for you?
I'll tell you on Friday, I'm not sure. I haven't seen them yet today. So, on Saturday it was, they came in and they knew we could have played better, when you asked earlier about, the excitement and everything. And it was a weird vibe after the game. Like, we're happy we won, but the guys knew we could have played better, and we could have, because we did leave some things out on the field, both sides of the ball and on special teams. But, yeah, it's going to be, our team meeting this afternoon, where we introduce, Southside to them, and I'm sure they've been watching some film already this weekend. So they should be excited. They should be, confident in their abilities and what we've been able to do and accomplish so far this year. But we're not done, like I said, and why not us? Why not? And that's going to be the theme, I think, going into it this week, with the guys.
Well, JT, thanks so much for doing this again. Congrats on the playoff win. I know that is a big, big deal for Greensburg Central Catholic, and hopefully keep it going against Southside as well.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And we appreciate hearing from the first-year head coach for Greensburg Central Catholic, JT, for taking the time out of his very busy schedule of preparation. I know your brother was starting to dive into some of the film already, right? He's an X's and O's guy, and he was really impressed by Southside.
Yeah, he really was. He really was. There's going to be a huge challenge for Greensburg Central Catholic. Yeah, I think he jumps on huddle because every time Derry, every week he'll look at the opponent. I'm not saying I need to give him a telestrator yet. Maybe someday. I don't know.
And pretty cool, by the way, that if you are just a high school football fan and you're looking for a game to go to in Westmoreland County, the option is there. You can go to Norwin High School and see Sean Benjamin.
That's true. Yeah. Norwin does host a lot of games too, man. They hosted one last week. I think Sarah Catholic and whoever they played. I can't remember, but
Well, I have the bracket here. I can look at it. Western Beaver. Yeah, they defeated Western Beaver. Yeah. Yes.
There you go.
Or Western Beaver won, actually. I didn't go to the game, obviously.
Liar.
Yeah, it's a great venue. We were there for soccer this week, and there's a reason why it's hosting the 5A.
I was going to say, all I know is Andy Phipps, the assistant athletic director at Norwin, said they had more people there for the Norwin boys soccer state game than the football game between Sarah Catholic and Western Beaver.
By the way, congrats to the Knights, huh?
Yeah, awesome. 1-0. Well, first they win the WPIAL championship in thrilling fashion and PKs, and then they win yesterday in thrilling fashion. Well, maybe not thrilling fashion, but a 1-0 victory. Yeah, he had to hustle over to help us out with soccer after doing PA on Saturday.
He's everywhere. What can you say about the man? A man of many talents. Well, I think we've ran through a lot, Flick, but I always give you the floor to anything else you want to convey. I know you've already mentioned we're doing that broadcast, and hopefully we will have some more for the playoffs forthcoming after that as well if our teams continue to do well.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, too, that all of the interviews that you see on the Gridiron throughout the year are up on our YouTube channel. We'd love to have you watch back to our show, but if you just want to, catch an interview here and there, Sean's done an amazing job of compiling all these interviews, talking to all these guys. You can check them out on our YouTube channel. Just type in Westmoreland Sports Network, or you go to our website and you can find how to get to our YouTube channel there. And Greensburg Central Catholic, Southside Beaver on WSN, but we'll also be tweeting updates of the Latrobe Aliquippa game, as well as Belle Vernon and Deer Lakes. We'll have their scores up on our scores tracker on the top of our homepage. And so we'll be covering all of the games in Westmoreland County. Plus, as I mentioned, Sean and John will be working with NFHS Network to bring everybody Penn Hills and Pine Richland on the NFHS Network. So that should be a great game. So we're looking forward to a lot of great high school football this Friday.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, to get ready, you can read the preview for the 3 Westmoreland County games. And then, of course, the recaps later Friday night after they all wrap up. Well, in all likelihood, this is probably the last time we're getting together for this show this year. So I know there's some tears coming down his face. We appreciate everyone who has joined us. Pretty much every coach in Westmoreland County at one point or another, by and large, we have had on the show. So we appreciate all of them. Plus, we had, 8 or 9 different player interviews throughout the season, to your point. They're all up on YouTube. You can go check those out. But it's been a lot of fun, and maybe we will get another year with another Westmoreland County champion, because we still have 3 teams remaining this year for title contention. So it's been a fun year. Let's put a bow on it now, Flick.
Let's do it, baby. I mean, this should be a lot of fun this weekend. And don't forget, too, even though this is the last week for the show, for any Westmoreland County team remaining after this week, I know, Sean, you'll be talking to the head coach of that team. So even though it won't be on the show, it'll be up on our YouTube channel, and we'll have it on our social media. So you'll know where to get a preview of all the games happening next week with our Westmoreland County teams. Hopefully there will be 3 more of them. We'll see kind of how everything breaks down this week.
All right. Well, perhaps for the final time in 2023, we will sign off. But thank you so much for tuning in, whether it be tonight or all season long. For my great broadcast colleague, Dan Flickinger, Sean Meyers signing off. Thank you so much for tuning into our coverage each and every Wednesday at 7 p.m. It's been right here on Westmoreland on the Gridiron.
Thank you so much, everybody.